Cloud. Okay, we're in business.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Sue, and I'm here today with Bruce Hamilton to have a conversation about intergenerational collaboration and activism. I'm part of the Climate Mental Health Network's Gen Z cohort, and I'm excited to speak with Bruce today. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Bruce Hamilton. I'm a national volunteer with Third Act, but I've been working on climate and democracy for my entire life, including about 50 years of professional working in the arena. So it's a continuation, but it's great to meet with Allison and younger cohorts in order to figure out how to continue this work and how I can be helpful for as long as I'm still around.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And now I can get into the first question. So I'd love to hear about how you first got involved with activism and also how you first got involved with Third Act in particular.
Yeah, so in the 60s, because I'm part of the boomer generation, there was a lot of activism going on around, whether it was civil rights or opposing the Vietnam War. Um, I was a conscientious objector during the war and we're protesting the war. So that was sort of early activism. Then in 1970, when Earth Day came around, I got very interested in the environmental movement, clean air, clean water. At that time, climate wasn't a big issue, but you know, other things were. And so I got involved in that, decided I would get a degree in wildlife biology because I love being in the outdoors and working to protect the natural environment. But pretty soon I realized I didn't just want to be a wildlife manager, I wanted to actually protect stuff. So I got off of the professional track and got onto the advocacy track. And I used to run a small little advocacy newspaper called High Country News up in Wyoming that my wife and I owned and ran. And then I switched over to the Sierra Club and at first started organizing, fighting coal-fired power plants and strip mining, um, working at the same time for wilderness and endangered species, um, clean air, clean water. But then I got higher up in the Sierra Club, ran the field program, ran the conservation and communications department, became the national policy director, the deputy executive director. So it just kept moving up and mentoring new people to come in and fill behind me. At that time, the Sierra Club was sort of growing by leaps and bounds, as was the environmental movement. So, we went from everybody working for the executive director to suddenly having a massive bureaucracy with, 200 offices scattered around the country.
Mhm.
And I was managing all that. But then when I turned 70, I retired from the Sierra Club and looked for the next thing, and Third Act came up right about then. So I've been active all my life, and I'm
Mhm.
trying to continue that. It's not the time to play golf and hang up your shoes because,
Mhm.
we didn't solve the problems. We created the
Yeah.
problems, my generation and those after us and before us. But we haven't done a good job, and it's really irresponsible to just turn around and say, I'm done with this. You guys fix it. But at the same time, I realize we can't do it on our own, even though we have a large cohort of the population and most of the financial resources and most of the voting power. But, we've got to work all across generations to solve this problem. It's going to take everybody to fix everything. How
Yeah.
about you? When did you get into activism?
Yeah, so I was really inspired by the youth climate protests back in 2019 because those obviously like blew up on the international stage, and it was just like really inspiring to see so many people my age like um, speaking out about the climate issue. And even though I didn't personally like get involved in any protests since I was like still like very new to this space, it did kind of cement this passion of mine to want to explore sustainability in college. So that's what I studied along with psychology. And yeah, I really want to be able to do something to address the climate crisis through my profession because I think it's the biggest issue of our time and related to just like every other social issue, to be honest. So I think I just like really want to do something about it and be able to do that like full time. And I was also just like really inspired to hear everything that you just said and kind of going off last things that you mentioned in terms of your generation and generations before as well as after um, contributing to the problem, but also being able to contribute to the solution. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you think we can collaborate across generations to reach that solution.
Well, as I say, it's going to take all of us, and so we have to collaborate. We can't work on different tracks. It's not going to work as a solution if I'm supporting one piece of legislation and you're opposing it and supporting a different one.
Mhm,
And too long, the big environmental groups thought they had all the answers. And, we
mhm,
were just going to drive the thing. And, in fact, that didn't work. And, some things didn't get adopted and some things didn't work even though they got adopted. But I
mhm,
think the other thing that showed the kind of great collaboration that could take place is, you know, Joe Biden was not my first choice for presidential candidate. I don't know who yours was, but in any
mhm,
case, um, he ultimately got the nomination. And
mhm,
he was not a real climate champion at the beginning. But when youth really started pressuring him and the other candidates and occupying Nancy Pelosi's office and things like that, it really moved the needle so that
mhm,
whoever was going to be the Democratic nominee, and it turned out it was Biden, they were suddenly going to make a lot of commitments on climate that had never been made by any presidential candidate before. And
mhm,
so that shows how this thing can work. That, if people like yourself or me had just sat it out and said, well, I wanted Bernie or I wanted Elizabeth Warren, you know, it would not have worked the same way. And, Trump would have been reelected to a second term right then. But
mhm,
because we agreed to work together and not insist that it had to be the Green New Deal or nothing, we were
mhm,
able to get through the Inflation Reduction Act, which was the biggest
mhm,
piece of climate legislation ever. We couldn't have got that through without the key vote of a guy named Joe Manchin, who was a big fossil fuel advocate from West Virginia, who finally voted for the bill because he got some sweeteners in it that were poison pills, but it was worth getting. And for the Sunrise Movement and other youth advocacy organizations and the Sierra Club and Third Act all to let down their guard and say, it's not perfect, but my God, this is going to move the climate needle like nothing else.
mhm,
That shows how we can work together. And the other thing that inspires me and encourages me is, Third Act makes a point of not marching at the front of the parade, not stealing all the credit. We don't care who gets the credit. We're glad to not
mhm,
be up on the podium and not be a speaker unless somebody wants to hear from us. So we're
mhm,
at the back of the parade. We're offering numbers, we're offering experience, we're, hopefully showing that it's not just a bunch of young people that are idealistic but impossible, but in fact, it reaches all across generations. And I think that's just an indication of how well this can work when the Allison Sues and the Jane Fondas, who's over 80, can come together and say,
mhm,
we both want this.
mhm. Yeah, no, that's really beautiful. And I also love that sense of humility from Third Act because I think, yeah, it's like really important to like amplify and like elevate all kinds of voices because the climate crisis doesn't like affect everyone equally. And yeah, it's like really great to hear that you're able to work across generations to make actual change happen. Um,
Yeah, and
so I also,
we don't have to live with all the consequences. You do.
Mhm,
So it would be so easy, as Donald Trump does, to just say, I'm not worried about tomorrow.
mhm,
I'm not going to see New York City flood and some other place burned to the ground. I could probably outlive the worst impacts as long as I don't live in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. But
mhm,
you know, it's important. I've got kids, I've got grandkids, so it's not just hypothetical saying I want to do something for future generations. I mean, I feel so responsible for them and all the beauty that I've been able to experience and all the joy that I got out of the world. I don't want to hand over a world where, you know, species are dying right and left and climate catastrophes are happening right and left. I mean, it's not a place that I want my kids and grandkids and you to grow up in.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that really speaks to like legacy and a lot of people of your generation are like grandparents and yeah, I think it makes sense to, you know, want to leave the world better off for like grandkids and for like future generations because, that's kind of you know, like how we exist as people is like we naturally care about future generations because, why else have children, you know? So, yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit about um like what keeps you going when things like end up going the wrong direction or like there are a lot of challenges in terms of maybe a lot of like losses, but no like big climate wins and how you keep going in those times.
Well, there's lots of things that keep me going and renew me. As a environmentalist and an environmental advocate, I've always been renewed by being in the outdoors. So I go camping, I go hiking, I go backpacking.
Mhm.
I may just take a walk in the evening along the waterfront, but just being in nature and enjoying all the aspects of nature. I'm a bird watcher, I'm a fly fisherman. It's in my blood and it's what makes me feel whole. But the other part of it is being with my kids and grandkids. I'm blessed with the fact that they all live within a 5 mile radius of me. And so I pick them up after school or after summer camp, and then I go hiking with them and teach them about backpacking. And at the same time, I'm taking them to climate marches, and they're learning about that. And
Mhm.
it's interesting. My one granddaughter is just so excited because she's got an electric car and she's got solar collectors on the roof, and pretty soon they're going to get an induction stove. Now, it turns out her mother actually is a paralegal fighting coal-fired power plants. So, she gets it from that angle too.
Mhm.
But it's fun to see, a 7 or an 8-year-old really get this thing and understand it and
Mhm.
want to be involved and asking me about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and wanting to come to a march.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's just seeing those young faces and realizing that they aren't in despair and feeling hopeless and angry because, how in the world could you have left this mess and screwed everything up? But instead, finding joy in action. You get
Mhm.
joy from being outdoors, but I also get joy from being on the front lines, holding polluters accountable,
Mhm.
winning on a legislative battle. I mean, that was my entire life at the Sierra Club was just, whether it's creating a new wilderness, a new wild and scenic river, strengthening amendments to the Clean Water Act or the Clean Air Act. Those are all good things that when you're done at the end of the day, it might have been a campaign that lasted 10 years, you say, yes, I've actually
Mhm.
improved the world, not only for
Mhm.
myself, but for everyone after me.
Yeah. And that's amazing to hear like all those different ways that you're able to like maintain hope, but also like channel that into action as well. So it's like, yeah, really great to hear all the different ways you're able to do that. And
How
then
do you do
also,
it?
for me,
Yeah.
I would, I would say that, yeah, I think what keeps me going is also action. Because I think it's easy to feel like I can't do anything and that leads into like a sense of powerlessness or like hopelessness. But it always like really helps to be doing like whatever I can about addressing climate change and especially to do that like within community and with other people, which is also why I think that um like the climate mental health network and the cohort is like such a great experience because I get to like be with other people who care about the climate crisis, and also being involved with Third Act in some ways, like from the people that I know in Third Act, and also being able to speak with you just it's really inspiring because I know that I'm not like alone in doing this. So I think that really helps me.
Well, I hope in addition to your climate activism, you've got something, whether it's nature or dance or music, that also gives you joy and gets you outside the front lines in the space, because you can turn into a
Mhm.
pretty anxious person if all you're doing is climate action 24 hours a day.
Mhm. Yeah, no, for sure. I think a lot of like small things in life give me joy, like whether that's being in nature. I'm like really lucky to have access to nature just like in my backyard, or like spending time my friends and family and like I have a cat at home, so I love him and doing things that I love to do, such as like reading, writing, listening to music. So there's like a lot of like small joys in life that I think are also like
Perfect.
really important to have.
Good. Balance. Important.
Yeah, for sure. Balance. Yeah.
I try to make sure every day I'm doing something, whether it's yoga, jogging, hiking,
Mm.
hugging
Mm.
grandkids and taking them to the playground to play soccer, just anything that gets me out of the activist space for some hours.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's like, yeah, definitely important to have that. It's like in a way it is like a form of rest. And I think, yeah, that's like easy to forget sometimes, but it's also like an important part of like being an activist, like being a person. And yeah, I think in our society it's easy to like want to always like keep pushing and keep going and never like taking a break. But that's like not sustainable. So yeah, I think it's important to remember that. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Good.
Yeah. And then I also wanted to ask you like what advice you might have for young climate advocates like myself. Um, yeah, just like based on your experience and what you've seen in the climate space.
Well, couple things. One is, what has sustained me is finding work that doesn't feel like work,
Mm.
that gives me purpose, where I feel at the end of the day, even though I may have had a 10-hour day in front of the computer or wherever it is, that it's not just to earn some money so that then I can go off on vacation. But in fact, it's doing something for whatever your cause is, whether you're, helping disabled people, or, you know, working on the environment, or, working on any number of other social services or good causes. So, I think that's really important, because, climate advocacy might be your full-time career, as maybe you're moving in that direction. That's one of the places where I was. But for other people, it's going to be a sideline, and there's something else that you're doing for most of your profession and most of your income and responsibility. And so I just think, trying to find things, being a teacher, being a lawyer, but doing it in a way where at the end of the day, you really feel like you've contributed something, because that's going to keep you going, so that you can then also feel good about the climate action. And then
Mhm.
pacing yourself so that you aren't just burning till you burn out, but in fact, you're taking care of yourself and saying, yeah, I know there's another march this Saturday, but frankly, I've got to get away. And I've done this 5 days in a row, as opposed to, you know, sorry.
Mhm.
Um, so, that's the secret of life that I've noticed and that I feel good about, is just trying to maintain a balance, and
Mhm.
just making sure that there's love in your life,
Mhm.
whether
Yeah.
it's your life partner or your kids or your community or
Mhm.
whatever it is. But, if you don't have that, um, kind of what are you living for? So
Mhm.
it's really important to take enough time so that you're also nurturing those people and those relationships.
Mhm. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And also, um, just coming from like a psychological standpoint, like relationships are like such an important piece, if not like the most important piece towards like happiness. And I think, yeah, like it's important to maintain those relationships and also just remember that, to be human is to, um, yeah, like be in relationship with each other. Um, so as like one final question, I just wanted to ask like what you see as the next step for the climate movement, like where do we go from here?
Well, the beauty and the difficulty of the climate movement is uh, it's everywhere. You can operate on the international level, you can operate on the national level, state, local, personal,
Mhm.
and they're all important. And, if you ask me right now, I would say don't spend a lot of time beating your head against the wall trying to influence Congress and get them to do something better. It's far more important to focus on the midterm elections and changing the Congress so that you can
Mhm.
ultimately play in that forum. That, there is lots of hope that takes place at the community level. There's lots of hope that takes place at the state level, even in some red and purple states, because we can't sort of stop the movement forward. I mean, that's one of the things about Sun Day coming up in September is, the idea that we're sort of saying, despite what the Trump administration and the MAGA right are saying, this is an unstoppable force and we aren't going to go back. So even though you're trying to prop up the coal industry and prop up the oil and gas industry and give them artificial subsidies and remove all the incentives for solar and wind, at the end of the day, you can't fight basic laws of physics and economics. And
Mhm.
so we will prevail. And, you know, California, Texas, Connecticut, New York, wherever it is, there's good stuff to be done. And so I think the best thing
Mhm.
to do is just keep looking for your best opportunities.
Mhm.
And it may be a piece of state legislation, it may be a city council resolution, it may be, working in a congressional campaign. Um, I don't know where it is. And, similarly, we've got to make sure that even though the US has kind of washed its hands and is backsliding at the international level, the other countries don't try to replicate that, but instead they turn around and double down and, eventually we'll have to catch up with them. But,
Mhm.
they're the ones that are going to get way ahead in the EV market and the solar collector market and everything else. And it's a shame that
Mhm.
we're losing that momentum that we had and
Mhm.
the opportunity to lead the globe. But, um,
Mhm.
hopefully with some new administration, we'll pick up the pace and get back there. So
Mhm.
we'll get there, but it's just a crime that, when we have so little time and we've already blown through a bunch of the targets that we had, uh, to then turn around and despair and give up is no solution. It's just, it's going to take longer. It's going to be harder and there's going to be a lot more damage and a lot more death before we finally get it right. But it's what we're stuck with because that's what too many people voted for.
Yeah, like that is definitely like the current reality. And I appreciate you like bringing up the fact that like other countries are still like moving ahead and that, there will be like a lot of like uphill battles in the US at least, but that like, we that doesn't necessarily mean that climate disaster is inevitable, and the fact that we can't handle it and we can't like do anything about it. So I think, yeah, it's like inspiring to see that at least other countries are doing something, and hopefully the US will catch up. So yeah, that's all the questions for today. So thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and knowledge. I really appreciate hearing about your work and yeah, everything you had to share. So yeah, thank you, Bruce, for sharing your time and wisdom. And yeah, follow the Climate Mental Health Network for more and find these resources on the website.
Well, and I want to thank you for all your time and wisdom. This has been a two-way street, and we have a lot to learn from you and follow your leadership and help you become a better leader with also the kind of political clout that we can bring to back you up as you move forward and take the reins of this thing. So um, I just see it as an ongoing collaboration that, uh, we got some things right. We got a heck of a lot wrong. And, hopefully you've learned from all that. And,
Mhm.
hopefully together we can come up with the better solutions and the better actions and more political power so that we won't continue to have this kind of um, backsliding taking place in the United States, because it's just so sad to see this happen. But I think people's eyes are opening up when they realize, hey, that's not what I really voted for.
Mhm.
And they see the consequences of it. And hopefully, next go round, it will come back to bite them. They will have overreached and we can get back on track.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll end recording here.